Secretary of State, you will find a number of candidates. One of them is Scotty Boman. Not that Scotty Boman, though, from the NHL, but another Scotty Boman who has made quite a name for himself in the world of politics, and he joins us now to tell us a little bit about himself. So welcome, Scotty Boman.
Hi, good to meet you, JoAnne.
Tell me about your platform, who you are and why you are running for Secretary of State.
Well, one of the big issues that has motivated me to become involved in the campaign for Secretary of State is that within 30 days after taking office, the next Secretary of State must decide whether or not Michigan will be enrolled in the Real ID Act. And I deeply oppose the Real ID Act. What it is an effort to convert the Michigan driver's license into a de facto national ID card. It would still say Michigan on it, but it would really be a national ID card with all your information going into a national database that would actually be shared internationally as a result of the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. So that's one of my big motivators. Another thing is the fact that even if, once I succeed in getting the spotlight on this issue, even if the next Secretary of State simply rejects the Real ID Act, there's still a danger of copycat laws going through. There's already something called the PASS Act that's been tossed about on Capitol Hill that they're trying to come up with an alternative since a lot of states have opted out of the Real ID Act. There's efforts, for instance, already in place where they put the RFID chip optionally in what they call an enhanced driver's license. And one of the big selling points of that is that they say, well, you can use that as a passport. Well, my answer to that is, well, you can use a passport as a passport. You can also use a passport card as a passport, which in effect is a real national ID card that one can choose to have for travel purposes. But as far as traveling around the state and going to and from work, I don't feel like I should be tracked by an RFID chip in my wallet everywhere I go. If I travel internationally, I guess I'm giving up a bit of liberty when I go to another country anyway.
So it was proposed by the current Secretary of State, Terry Lynn Land. It was used as a template for a national identification card. So what you're saying is if in 30 days after the election, even a regular driver's license will have this chip in it where we can all be tracked?
It would mean Michigan would be enrolled in a law that would include that. They wouldn't they wouldn't call everybody in to show up, in huge lines as if they're not bad enough at the Secretary of State's office to trade in their old IDs. But what would happen is then as their driver's license expired and they went to get new ones, the new ones would then have these other characteristics. And it wouldn't just be the chip. A lot of people get hung up on the object. But you see, there's also then this factor of the database that would be shared and become a one-stop shop for identity thieves. And it's sort of like putting a picture up on Facebook. Like you'll see these billboards every once in a while alerting people that once you put it on the internet, you can't delete it. And it's the same thing with your personal information. Is once it's out there, once it's been gathered and put in a place where it can be exchanged, there's no telling where it goes, and you can't pull it back. Once it's shared, it's out there. You could ask for it, but it doesn't mean you're going to get it back. It doesn't mean the people you shared it with haven't shared it with someone else. It's out. It's like a secret. So for that reason, also, we need to resist the nationalization of the records the Secretary of State office keeps on you, as well as the instrument itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, some would say, though, if you have nothing to hide, hide nothing. What is the problem with being tracked or having that little ID card?
Well, if you're a criminal and you've been found guilty of a crime, I have absolutely no problem with requirements such as these being placed on you. I have another issue, our biometric information that could be scanned on people, stored in computers, and they could track your movements not just by a chip, but by your facial patterns using recognition systems on cameras. I have no problem with any of that for a person that's been convicted of a crime. First thing you do when you go in is you get a mug shot and you get fingerprinted. If they want to do higher resolution mug shots of people, as long as they purge them if they're found not guilty, I have no problem with keeping records of people convicted of crimes. Mm-hmm. In that case, I would say those people have forfeited their liberties by violating the liberties of others. What I'm concerned about is innocent people being tracked that haven't done anything wrong. They might say, well, what do you have to fear? Well, I guess the assumption here is somehow the people in government are perfectly trustworthy and can do no wrong. I'm not confident of that. Short of a malevolent dictator, all you need is a couple dishonest people with their hands getting into that information, a few staffers for it to get out and cause harm to your privacy and your identity.
You actually were affiliated with the ACLU, and it would sound like it from your argument there, but you were at odds with them over your support of the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative. Tell us how all that came down.
I see you've done a little bit of research.
Well, Scotty Boman, come on, I had to know all about it.
Yeah, no, I was the affiliation was strictly membership. They never welcomed me on their boards or anything like that. I had no official capacity. Though I was a guest speaker at one of their panels a long time ago. And interestingly enough, it was on a similar topic, and they were looking for someone to speak in opposition to some aspects of the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. I disagree with the parts that apply to private businesses, because I think private businesses should be able to decide who they interact with, even if their reasons are completely flawed. And I think all discrimination is completely flawed. And for the same reason that I think all discrimination is completely flawed, I opposed them on the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative because it was simply a ballot initiative to change the state constitution to end state-sponsored racial, sexual, and ethnic discrimination. That's what it was. And the fact that they, claiming they're for civil liberties, would turn around and support institutionalized racism effectively, institutionalized sexism, institutionalized, I don't know if nationalism's the right word, ethnicity-ism, strikes me as obscene and counter to the reason anyone that I would think would be interested in their organization would want to join. And so I discontinued. I think I had renewed my subscription later when they started focusing more on things I agreed with them on, such as opposing the Patriot Act and other intrusions on our liberty. But I had to take a stand on that because it was just I was running for office actually with as a lieutenant governor candidate with my the top of ticket Gregory Creswell, both opposing the continuation of state-sponsored discrimination, and both being the only top of ticket candidates in support of the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative. In fact, the Libertarian Party was the only political party that across the board came out in favor of the Michigan Civil Rights Initiative. And we were, a lot of people think we're on the fringe, libertarians, they're weird and extreme. Well, the majority of the voters are weird and extreme, and what's your definition of weird and extreme then? The establishment politicians were the ones who lost that fight.
Mm-hmm. You have had quite an interesting background. You were, for a time, a Republican and then became a Libertarian. You were raised by a Democratic politician, so you really had insight into the political world very early on in life and decided to kind of branch out a little bit. Take us through that transition. Okay,
well, yeah, the sequence in which you describe things is a little different. Yes, I was raised by Democratic parents, and my father, in fact, was an active Democrat. He was not only a precinct delegate, he was a state convention delegate, and he was even a delegate to the national convention. I can't remember which year, but it was the one where Ted Kennedy was seeking the nomination. I remember that much about it. And my mother's always been a Democratic voter as well, except she votes for me. My father isn't around to do that, unfortunately. And actually, I, for a long time, embraced a lot of the ideas of the Democratic Party, but I still thought they were maybe a bit too restrictive on people's personal, private behaviors. But I tended to agree with the socialist wing of the Democratic Party, and early in my college years, almost in the, I forgot who I'm paraphrasing here, but it's kind of like if you're not a socialist, by the time you're, old enough to vote or something, you have no heart, and if you're not a capitalist, by the time you're older, you have no brains or something. It was kind of like that. Basically, I had taken on, and I really wanted more personal liberty, so I did value that all along. That was the libertarian half of me that was, I think, innate. I didn't see a connection between that and economic liberty. And the person who really opened my eyes to that, I guess I could credit one person in person, her name was Alice, and handed me a book called Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, and she said, here, this is yours, read it. All I'm asking you is you read it. So I read it, and I kind of mockingly, like, oh yeah, right. And I went reading through that book, and when I finished that book by Ayn Rand, I was sold. I was a laissez-faire capitalist. I went on to read like pretty much all her other work, and continued to read on in free markets and free thought and free behavior. I basically learned that once you make other people responsible economically for you, they really have a stake in your personal behavior. And if they have a stake in your personal behavior, you've now given them a reason to control your personal behavior. It's sort of like the thing if you're a kid and you live at home and you say, well, I have the right to do this, I have the right to do that, and the parent says, not under my roof you don't. Well, it's like that. If you're depending upon the rest of society to take care of you, then you can no longer say, oh, I have a right to decide what I smoke, drink, or eat. You no longer have that right because you have said that the other people are responsible for you. So now they have a stake in your own behavior. So there's a bridge here between personal behavior and economic freedom that you really can't fully have one without the other. And that's why I see that the Republicans have lost because they think that somehow, they can control personal behavior, and that's somehow not going to turn into some kind of economic control, and in fact it does. The Democrats, on the other hand, now have actually pretty much embraced controlling everything. And actually, I'd say, I might add, the Bush Republicans pretty much were into controlling everything, too. The reason, now the Republican thing came in thanks to a man named Ron Paul. And Ron Paul, I had already voted for once before and supported in 1988 when he ran for United States president as a libertarian. So when I was elated when I found out this guy was actually getting on nationally televised debates as a Republican candidate for U.S. president, because they had basically gone out of their way to ignore this man in his efforts to run. He had already been a congressman before, but the national media, AP, UPI, Associated Press, ABC, NBC, and CBS had all carte blanche said they would not report his election results no matter what he got. They weren't interested in covering his campaign at all. They completely ignored him. So he was there getting publicity now simply because he was running as a Republican for president. And he hadn't even been nominated yet. The other problems he had after already being nominated as a libertarian. So I was excited about that, and I'm like, I care more about liberty and seeing some of the beliefs I hold dear actualized than I do about any particular political party. So I had no problem starting to get involved in Republican politics on behalf of Ron Paul. In the course of doing that, I became a precinct, I got elected to be a precinct delegate, and I couldn't, unfortunately, be a precinct delegate or convention delegate in the choosing of Ron Paul because there's certain rules. There's a time lag involved when you get elected and later. But got myself in place for 2012 in case he makes another go at it, because I've become a precinct delegate and been reelected as a Republican precinct delegate, and I'm still a Republican precinct delegate and was a delegate at the state convention, choosing my opposition, and I guess I got the opposition I chose, so, which makes my campaign a little bit uphill, because a lot of people who adore Ruth Johnson would have supported me had she not been nominated.
Really? You're kind of a hybrid, though, right? You are a libertarian, you're on the ballot as a libertarian, but you really do align with some of the Republican policies, is that?
I align with Republicans who are small L libertarians. A small L libertarian, but when we say that, capital L is a proper noun for an organization, the Libertarian Party of Michigan, the big L, Libertarian Party. Small L is as a description of an ideology or philosophy, libertarianism. And I support anyone, I support a Democrat libertarian. If someone got in the Green Party ticket but they held libertarian views, I would support them. It'd be kind of ironic, but I'd still do that because I'm interested in liberty, however it can be done, and if it's done, with a different mask on the person, or different uniform on the player, so to speak, that's no problem for me.
Okay. Moving on to the economy, creating jobs in the state of Michigan. People say it's not rocket science, but if it were, you would be the man for the job. You have a quite impressive list of credentials. Academically, tell us a little bit about some of the degrees you have. You are a college professor as well.
Oh, yes. I mean, I might add, actually, rocket science is much easier than economics, though, they actually do go out of their way to make it sound even more complicated than it actually is. You know, it was interesting. One of my big interests when I was growing up was in 1969, people used to be able to do this thing called going to the moon. And they used to also be able to buy plane tickets to fly around the world, but that's some of the lost knowledge of the ancients. That'd be nice if people could figure that all out again. I think a lot of it had to do with having a stronger economy that could endure such things, and the poor economic policies that followed had a lot to do with it. For instance, that was done before we went off the gold standard. In '72 is when Nixon took us totally off the gold standard, and actually it was one of the pivotal moments in helping to form the Libertarian Party, because a lot of people who were Republicans that were hoping maybe they could stand for a free market and were backing Barry Goldwater, for instance, said, okay, that's it. There's no hope for the Republicans now. They got Nixon in there, and he's like trying to control the whole economy. But just a little sidebar. That's what motivated me to get into the sciences, though, really.
Really?
And I went on to, and I suspect in the future I'll have a lot fewer scientists by a similar analogy here. But I went on to, research what kind of sciences would be good to get into if I wanted to be an astronaut. And I even wrote a little letter as a young person to NASA asking that question. And the answer I got back was I looked at a few things, and one of them was physicist. And that seemed to be closest to my interest. And so I went into physics, I took all the science I could in high school, including physics. I didn't actually get all those terrific a grade. My grades actually improved over time. I went to a school that didn't even have grades, 2nd through 8th grade, and probably learned a whole lot more since I had to actually think about learning things instead of getting grades. But I had to renew my skill at getting grades through high school. And but by then, I went to college, and grades kept getting better and better, and then grad school, better yet. So pretty much all A student now. But yeah, I got a master's in physics, and my bachelor's was in physics and philosophy, because along the way I had also, and growing up, my father he was also an attorney in addition to being politically active. He had run for judge, by the way, also. He'd been a candidate for office in that way. He was very good at debate and taught me a lot of debate and philosophy. He was a lay person at the church, and there was a lot of philosophy going, backing up his theology. So I became quite versed in discussion and debate, and it forced me to think logically. And a lot of people hear us talking, they thought we were mad. Will you guys stop fighting? And it's like, no, we're not mad. This is fun. People didn't understand it.
You're made to be a politician then.
Yeah, but that's what got me into philosophy. And really, physics started out as a branch of natural philosophy. So a lot of times I tell people, I got a double major, physics and philosophy. They'd be like, that's an interesting combination. And interestingly enough, one of those Ayn Rand books, I'm reading it, and her main character named John Galt ran into a situation where he studied physics and philosophy, and people would, when he mentioned that, they'd go, that's an unusual combination. And he goes, check your premises.
Well, with all that background, with all that knowledge, when you take a look at some of the issues that are facing the state of Michigan, and I know you're running for Secretary of State, not the governor, but if you were to put out some ideas on what the state needs to do to turn itself around economically, what would be some of your ideas? What do you think it needs to do?
Well, I definitely am not for more spending projects, and definitely for not any new taxes either. I think they need to come up with ways to increase revenue for the things they do need while reducing mandatory fees, also known as taxes. Secretary of State's office, for instance, collects a lot of mandatory fees, and while I may not be able to get rid of all of those, and one could only hope that the fees people are forced to pay go to the services they use, such as if you're driving, to the roads and servicing the roads and the traffic control and so forth. I would at least like to minimize the amount of mandatory fees people could pay and bring those down to as small level as possible. And in order to do that, we have to find not mandatory fees people are willing to pay. One of my ideas I have is that we have these personalized license plates that become very popular, and they're a little more expensive than standard license plates. But I think of a way we could get a whole lot more money out of these personalized plates. I suggest competitive bidding. So the most popular phrases or numbers or whatever people want to choose to put on their plates, that those most popular items end up bringing in a lot of revenue to the Secretary of State. That you have competitive bidding, the person makes the highest bid for a given phrase, gets that selection, the one that bids under that doesn't. And so that's one of my fundraising ideas. Another idea to improve service without raising costs is, a lot of the cost of a Secretary of State's office is overhead. You have to have a building, you have to have people staffing it, and so forth. Well, a lot of the Secretary of State functions could be served through private businesses, and it could even be businesses that have other services. And this is already done to some degree. I'm thinking of expanding the idea and doing it in a much broader scope. For instance, auto dealerships currently can give you a title. They can do the title transfer. They can give you the registration, and they have plates on hand they can hand you and put right on the car, so you can drive away and you're all done and legal. You don't have to fuss around trying to figure out, oh no, how long can I drive without any plate, or am I going to get pulled over on this way? Don't make the mistake like I once did of putting your other plate on your car on the way to the Secretary of State's office. I did that on a Saturday. It was closed. They used to have Saturday hours. They stopped having them. And not only that, but I had this other plate on, my old plate moved over, just stuck it on the other car thinking I could do that. Misdemeanor.
Wow.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't even know that. But what we could do is, basically make everything more convenient to people. People in rural areas, they, instead of having to travel to the big city to get their license plates or tabs, they should be able to go to any local dealerships to do that, even if it's not where they're buying their car. Or if they need to simply renew their registration and get those little stickers, those could be kept behind the counter at people, the same people that might have a little general store and have a post office there and so on, and put that all together. They put information into the system and not pull information out, so that people's privacy would still be protected.
A couple of things. We only have a couple of minutes left, but lawmakers are focusing now on the driver responsibility fee as opposed to working on the state budget, to where they probably should be focusing their attention. They're working on something that won't take effect for years anyway. Your impression of whether the driver responsibility fee that was imposed, which generates a considerable amount of money for the state of Michigan, is something that should go away?
Absolutely. Especially now that we're in a depression, people are struggling to get by. My best guess is, people even have to pay the fee for not having insurance. In other words, because they don't have enough money, they mess up and they don't get insurance, and then you give them another fee to make sure they won't be able to afford insurance. That's crazy. Then at the same time, those same people now can't get work. They can't find work, so they're showing up at the unemployment office trying to seek more benefits. They're showing up, at the Family Independence Agency when they could be working, but they're being held back by this driver's responsibility fee. It's a crazy idea.
Okay.
It needs to go.
You mentioned opening up some of the Secretary of State offices on Saturday. Terry Lynn Land closed down a number of facilities. She took some heat for it as well, but she said that was the way to consolidate and to save money. That is not, in your assessment, a good idea?
No, it's not, because as long as you have the Secretary of State's run in a top-down manner, government managed like that, I suppose closing some offices, would come out to a net savings in money. But if you could instead have those services available at more locations without the necessity of the formal offices, or to have them at fewer locations, but have the other idea. In other words, maybe I would not have any more standard full service Secretary of State's offices, but I'd have more mini offices, I guess you could call it, locations within private businesses that already exist, that already pay their own overhead, where people could go and take care of that. And instead of the money going to all that overhead, the money would be going as a basically commission to the people working those private operations. And as far as the Saturday thing goes, I don't understand why Saturday. It seems to me that would be the day when more people would want the services, rather than a weekday where they have to miss work or go running there during lunch, possibly getting traffic tickets or endangering people's safety, running to and from the Secretary of State's offices, or rushing there before they close after work. Saturdays, I know a lot of people work on Saturday too, but Saturday's the day when you're going to probably have a larger volume of people needing service. If she only could be open 5 days a week, then close one of the weekdays. Mm-hmm. But the Saturday thing was crazy.
Okay, well, excellent. Scotty Boman, thank you so much. We appreciate all your time, all your ideas. Running for Secretary of State on the Libertarian ticket, we thank you for being with us. We also thank you for being with us, and we hope to see you back on our next show. Bye-bye, everybody.
Did you know Meridian Township has a recycling center? Did you know it's located at 49